And then the second, who's doing the?
Tim Crossley.
Okay, well you guys can do that transition. All right, take it away, Matt.
Cool, thanks, man. All right, so my presentation is entitled Streamlining Your Django Project with vim+tmux, if you can read that. So I thought it would be cool. There's a tool called vim.deck. It's written by, I don't know who, it's a project on GitHub. I've got a link to it in my presentation. But what it does is it takes your markdown source and converts the headers into ASCII art, converts the list items into bulleted list items, and a lot of other cool things. So whether cool or really stupid,
Very dorky.
We're very, very dorky. Yeah. Hey, it's, whatever works. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing you might be wondering is, why? Why Vim? Why not Sublime? Why not PyCharm? Why not all these wonderful, lovely editors? Well, the reason that I like to use Vim, many reasons. The primary reason is it keeps me closer to the command line, and that's where I feel like I have the most power to do things. As developers, we often, especially web developers, we often find ourselves on the command line.
You increase your font size a little bit?
I think that's about as good as I can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you were in like an editor, you could like.
Uh-oh, now he's been challenged.
Yay!
See now everything.
Character is facing.
Sorry, I'll talk about everything that's up there, and I'll have links to the presentation.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm trying to type in 20 right there in the size.
Oh man, why did that happen? I tried that earlier, like.
Oh, really? Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. I don't know why. There we go. Let's skip ahead a little bit. I use a tool called tmuxinator to keep all of my project configs. So I can do mux start vim.ide and get right back to where we were. All right. So aside from the font thing, Vim's actually really cool. Another reason I like to use Vim is it's everywhere. I do a lot of SSHing into remote servers, and I can rely on my trusty Vim to be there almost every time. So it just makes sense to me to try to use the same editor in all environments. Vim is open source, it's mature, it's been around since 1991, about the same age as Linux. It's fast, it's very, very speedy. I used to be an Eclipse guy. I did Java development for 5 years. And I loved Eclipse. I think the plugin architecture is great, but it's so freaking slow. Like every time I would try to do something, it would take forever, and eventually it started wearing on me, and I had to do something about it. And that's pretty much it for this slide. I mean, Vim is pretty much in life and in programming in general, minimalism is a good thing. And Vim, I think, is a very minimal solution to editing text, but it's very powerful if you want to extend that minimalism. Vim is always going to be around. It's been around, like I said, since 1991. It's open source. It's it's got a very big following. I don't have any reservations thinking that it's going to go away one day. Vim is a long-term investment. It's something that I know that I can take with me throughout my career, and I can learn when I have time. I can learn new, powerful ways to do things. And this is one thing that I would encourage all of you to do, regardless of which editor you use. Take the time to sit down, think about what you're doing, figure out your inefficiencies. Take a day, take a few hours of a day, and try to figure out how you can make those inefficiencies better, because it really does pay off almost immediately. So I touched on this, but a lot of you guys, I know, really love PyCharm. PyCharm's a great editor. JetBrains makes some very good tools. The thing about PyCharm that always bugs me is it's still a Java tool, and that matters a little bit less now with solid-state drives, and with memory being so abundant and so cheap. But it's still, there are times with all Java applications for me that it'll just like hang up, and it'll take longer to do something than I think it should. And maybe that's a personal qualm, but I still think I have that problem with PyCharm. Other than that, I mean, PyCharm's a great editor. JetBrains makes, like I said, really good tools. Vim is another solution. It's not for everybody, but for me, it's a great solution. Sublime, another great editor. I know a lot of you probably use it. Sublime is great. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's a GUI solution. I put this little comment in here. By the time you've reached for your mouse, I've already done what I've intended to do. You can edit in Sublime without a mouse. I would encourage you to look into ways to use that power. For me, like the act of going to the mouse, like copying, selecting text it just takes so long. And it's one of those inefficiencies that I try to remove from my personal inter-workday habits. But again, both PyCharm and Sublime, if I weren't using Vim, I would probably be using one of those. They're good editors. Vim is something different. If you're worried about the learning curve, this is something that I always say when people are saying that. Did you all ever play Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, any of those like not strategy games, but fighter games? And how many like freakishly random, like awful like controller combos there were to memorize? Did you complain about the learning curve for those games? Do you get paid to play those games? So you're telling me that it was a worthwhile investment for you to learn those combos, but it's not a worthwhile investment for you to learn a little bit of power in Vim? That's my argument.
So.
All right, so enough talking. Let's dig a little deeper into how I use Vim and how I use some other tools in combination with Vim to do my work day to day. So the first piece of the puzzle that really brought everything together for me. Do you see how I have all these windows? Well, these are actually panes in tmux, but I've got shell, tmux, vimRC, editor, presentation. We're on the presentation pane right now. Those are configured in a tmuxinator config file, which tells me anytime I start this project, all those windows open, and I can tell it what happens to initialize all those windows. And it gives me a really easy way to switch back and forth. So when I work on a lot of projects, and one of the things that I was losing a lot of time doing was trying to catch up on, I'm switching from this project to the next one. Now I've got to remember, like, I've got to have a window open for the server, I've got to have a window open for my grunt watchers, I've got to have a window open for, so I can browse my site packages, so I can get in there and like see everything related to my project. Now I don't have to remember any of that. It goes in my tmuxinator config, and I can switch over to the tmuxinator config just like that, and we can see how I've configured this project. So you can see right here, the presentation is initialized by running this program called vimdeck, which I was telling you about. Compiles the markdown to the presentation that I'm showing you right now. In one window, in this project, I also have a sample Django project. So I'm running the server. I've got a grunt watcher set up to compile SAS files. All of that's already set up, done, ready to go. So coming back to the presentation. Again, touching on the long-running processes, having the server and the grunt watchers. Those are right here, 5 and 6. So Django server is running. If I go to the app, it's on port 3000, which I have mapped to Andre in my localhost mapped to Andre. So if we're on Andre 3000, you can see that. So the server's running. Let's say that I want to make a change to the CSS. Well, I'm using Compass on this project, which uses SAS, so I can't directly refer to the SAS files. They get compiled to the CSS files under bundles. So if I go to the grunt watcher, you can see that it's listening right now. It's waiting. If I make a change to application CSS, what if I don't like the pony? Okay, I don't like the Django pony. Boom, get rid of it. My grunt watcher has already done its work. I should be able to refresh the page, and boom, it's already done. I forgot I have library load on that app. So everything's automatic. I can switch back and forth really easily, even between a Django project and a presentation. Again, this is using tmuxinator to configure the project. It's using tmux as the terminal multiplexer. And again, using Django and Compass as the application, the simple application. Another thing that I like to use Vim for quite heavily, a thing that saves me a lot of time is setting breakpoints. And in my Vim config, I'm using a couple of possible candidates for these breakpoints. I think it's Python mode. There's a Vim plugin called Python mode that has this this mapping for creating a breakpoint in your Python code. I've got it mapped to leader B. If you guys are familiar with Vim at all, leader is just a term that's used for a certain key, a certain special key in Vim. Most people map it to comma, and I have mine mapped to comma as well. So if I type comma B within any Python source, I'll automatically get a breakpoint there. So we can try that out. Let's say there's no logic in this view. Let's say that there was some logic. Let's say that I'm having a bug somewhere in this view. I don't know where. So leader B, refresh. Now I can go to my server tab, and I've got PDB right there. I can debug. I can print out values. I can step through the code. And I would encourage you all, this is not incredibly directly related to Vim, but if you're not using PDB, you're spending more time debugging than you need to. Bottom line.
I think tomorrow's DC Python unit was about debugging, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, should go to that. Yeah, I don't remember.
I will its
Oh, cool. Are you Matt?
Yeah.
The other Matt. Yeah, I'm gonna go to your meetup, your Vim meetup in April.
Yeah, if anyone doesn't know, there's Vim meetups, and now we alternate between Northern Virginia and DC. So it's Tyson's Corner and Chinatown. So every month there's a Vim meetup. We talk about plugins, configuration, lots of other good stuff.
Sweet.
So,
Yeah, go check that out once you convert to Vim. Or go check that out to become a convert to Vim. Leader B again to remove the breakpoint. I don't have to save the file, it gets done automatically. The cool thing, which you have to be a little bit careful with, and there are better ways to do this, but the way that I tend to use this, I can also go to my side packages. Typically when I set up a project, I will reserve one of the windows, the tmux windows, for automatically changed into my side packages directory, so I can get in there and I can move around, I can work through dependencies, and if there's a bug in dependent code. Right now, I think like pretty much the only dependency I have in here is Django, but if I wanted to debug something that was actually happening within Django, I can do that too. Yeah, that should be. So I can put a breakpoint right there, as long as I remember to remove the breakpoint. I'm good, now I can debug the Django source. Step through and do what I need to do in there. Super helpful. And editing code. So there are a few useful plugins that I use for Django that I have hooked up in my Vim config. Let's look at a few of them. Oops. So jump to definition and code completion. So this is really cool and really useful. Let's say I want to jump to Django.shortcuts or even render to response to see what's going on in there. I've got that mapped to leader J, so I type comma J, and now in a new tab, this is a new tab within Vim, I can step through the render to response source. And this comes from Python mode as well. It's a really cool Django or Python plugin for Vim. Another feature is code completion. Let's say that I don't remember where render to response is, but I remember it's somewhere, or I don't remember it's in Django.shortcuts, so I can do it from Django.shortcuts. Boom. Code completion comes from another plugin called Jedi Vim. Again, these are all in my presentation. If you have any questions about those, I can help answer that. I tried to kind of outline where everything comes from, but I was just pointing out to some of my coworkers before the presentation, my VimRC is like 350 lines long, so I don't always know exactly where things come from. Let's see. Snippets, another thing, it's something I'm just learning about. I'm just starting to try to integrate, but it's basically shortcuts for typing out code. So at the top of every Python file, there are, as an example, a few things that I like to have. I never remember what they are, but I can remember the shortcut for the snippet, which is just pound exclamation point. So if I do that, pound exclamation point tab, now I've got all my leading statements for my Python file. There are tons and tons and tons of snippets already written out there. You can write your own too. All you have to do is add it to your Vim config, pull down the appropriate Vim snippets project. I've forked that to create my own snippets. You have the power to do basically anything you want. You can also cycle through arguments if you have snippets. You can have a snippet that does opens a template tag and closes the template tag, and it'll automatically take you to the middle of the template tag so you can fill out what you need to put there. Pretty cool. And Vim Surround, I'm not going to show you that because it's another thing that I'm just starting to really learn about. Vim Surround was a tool written by Tim Pope, who, within the Vim community, very, 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 very important guy because he's written so many of these plugins. But Vim Surround lets you do some really, really cool things. If you have, for example, a string that's surrounded by double quotes and you wanted to change it to single